Hi all, have you ever had an opportunity with procrastination? Or the action of delaying or postponing something? What causes it? I don't think it's because we're lazy, and I don't necessarily believe we're avoiding a particular task either. I believe, and this may sound strange, but I think that it's our frame of mind at a particular moment in time. If that decision had been presented to us 2 hours earlier, we may have just accepted it, performed it, and moved on. But something happened, and we thought differently for a moment. I'm Marty with Warehouse and Operations as a career. Let's talk about what can throw us off course. Now, of course, there's a lot of science, a lot of opinions, and quite frankly, a lot of nonsense about why people procrastinate. We'll talk about a few of those things here in a couple of minutes, but first I'd like to share a few of my thoughts and experiences with procrastination. So last week a safety manager had asked a crew manager, and he happened to be in another state. Anyway, he'd asked him for some information. I think it was an SOP or standard operation procedure for a particular task. The manager was going to get it to him before the close of business that day. Well, 3 days later, the safety manager inquired about that SOP. The crew manager, of course, apologized and said that he would send it over shortly. A handwritten sheet was emailed about 30 minutes later. Now, I know this crew manager really well. He's a great guy, very committed, and he knows his stuff. His job, inside and out. He's just not necessarily comfortable using Microsoft Office products, though. I believe, and this is just my opinion, that a case of human nature sunk in. I think he did not want to format a Word or Excel document, so his mind just dropped the subject. And then when it was brought up again, a simple handwritten procedure was put together and sent over, under the guise of needing it to be sent over immediately. Now, there was absolutely no laziness there. Like I said, he knows the procedures. More than anybody else, he knows the process. But his mind said no, not right now. Another quick example, I had an associate come to me asking a few questions about a project that they were asked to help with. No deadline was brought up, but it needed to get done. The person that had explained it just hadn't been 100% clear when communicating what they wanted. And the associate didn't ask any questions or try to clarify what was needed. So what happened? The mind pushed it to the end of the stack of projects. Now this one has a happy ending. I knew a little about the project, so I could point them in the right direction, and it was finished up in like an hour. Let's look at one more. A receiver had 3 loads left to get tagged and received for the day. One was a 16-pallet load, another had 22 pallets, and the third was a breakdown load that would end up being 67 pallets. Both small and large wood. 47 different items were on it. All 3 trailers or containers were being unloaded at the same time. Now, all 3 had missed their scheduled appointments and was going to cause the shift to run over for the day, probably like 2 hours. The receiver had gone to the check-in office and retrieved the purchase orders and tags and, everything that he needed for all 3 loads and was diligently working the 2 smaller loads. Something in his mind, and not just anger, kept him from just accepting the fact that the late load had been accepted. He knew he was going to do it. He had to do it. But it was going to be the absolute last thing he did for the day, and it was going to take him a little longer to complete it. Human nature, it's not anything to mess around with. We can't let it suck us into its clutches. I know myself, I stay pretty busy. I've caught myself shying away from much easier tasks than the one that I chose to do at the time. I don't know why. It's not laziness. I, being my mind or soul, just doesn't want to deal with it at that moment. Fortunately, I've learned to ignore some of those thoughts. I guess you could say I've learned to fight procrastination. In our chosen fields, there's little room for putting things off. And I must admit that although I feel like I'm doing better fighting procrastinating in my professional life, I am still struggling far too much with it in my personal life. So how do we fight it? Here's a couple of things that I've came up with. Number 1, prioritize our opportunities. If something isn't important to you, you'll probably spend very little time trying to achieve it. That reality is the basis of your priority list. The achievements that really matter most belong at the top, of course. Everything else can fall kind of where it falls. And that might even mean falling off of the list. Focus on the things that give you the most inner joy and happiness. Never mind what popular opinion thinks. If something gives you butterflies every time you think about it, that's what you want to work towards. Once your list is in place, start at the very top. The most important thing deserves the most attention. You're guaranteed ultimate satisfaction once you achieve it. Number 2, break down tasks into achievable bits. This is something that I really struggle with. It's easy to put things off because they seem too overwhelming. Your natural instinct may be to shy away from things. Number 3, renew your commitment each day. In order to stay on track, it's important to maintain commitment to the goal. That can be easily achieved by renewing your commitment each day. When you wake up, remind yourself of your purpose. Take a look at what you're motivated to achieve. The feeling of excitement about achieving a desired goal is constantly alive in us. You just need to re-engage it regularly. And I find this exercise also helps me to maintain focus on what's important to me. In fact, you may even find that the spark of a goal kind of fades from time to time. This can happen when you realize something you thought was important really turns out not to be. I believe daily renewal helps you to zone in on what means the most to you. And then number 4, reward yourself for each achievement. It's important to keep yourself engaged and focused on the goal. A great way to do this is to reward ourselves, right? As you achieve each small task, celebrate the progress that you've made. Make a significant effort to celebrate your achievements. Kind of a half-hearted effort isn't really going to be enough. To maintain commitment, you have to reward yourself well every step of the way. Treat yourself to something you've always wanted. Maybe in the past you've avoided spending on it because it just wasn't worth it. But now you have every reason to go out and get it. Being kind to ourselves is the best way to motivate those continued focus on goals. When you know there's a reward at the end, you'll likely commit every ounce of effort necessary. There are more than enough reasons for you to go after meaningful goals. If you're honest with yourself, you can easily list them all on a piece of paper. Focus on doing something to move towards your goal today. Leave tomorrow for celebration of today's success. I have found some really good articles about procrastination this week. Once I've digested them, I'll put them up on the website. Feel free to download whatever you'd like. It's still a work in progress, but it's coming together. If you haven't checked it out lately, it may be worth a look. Well, I have got to quit procrastinating today and finish up this workbook that I'm doing for a company. Until next week, plan your week out and watch that human nature thingy. Be productive and safe.